dark matter.
Her mother had been a careful woman, not superstitious, not fanciful, a retired school teacher who had kept precise records of everything, who had dated every photograph she had ever taken with the specific thoroughness of someone who understood that memory was unreliable and documentation was not. She did not make mistakes with dates. She had not made a mistake with this date. Caroline picked up the photograph. She looked at the window, at her own silhouette in the lit window. She looked at the garden in the photograph, at the hydrangeas, at the front walk with its crack, at the hanging shutter. She looked at the angle of the photograph. It had been taken from approximately the center of the front garden. Whoever had taken it had been standing in the garden looking up at the window. She looked at the silhouette in the window. She looked at the garden in the photograph. She looked at the silhouette in the window. She understood something. The silhouette was her. She was in the window. She recognized herself completely. But whoever had taken the photograph was standing in the garden below. And the photograph had been in her mother's house, and her mother was dead. She stood up from the kitchen table. She went to the front window, the ground floor, looking out at the front garden, the hydrangeas, the cracked walk, the hanging shutter. She looked at the garden.
Story 4. Below. The submersible had been at depth for 6 hours when Dr. Mara Chen saw the shelf. She had been to the Mariana Trench twice before, once as a graduate student, once as the lead researcher on a bioluminescence survey, and she knew the terrain the way you know a place you have studied obsessively from above and visited twice. She knew the expected features, the Challenger Deep, the Hadal Zone fauna, the specific quality of the dark at 11 kilometers, which was not the dark of a room with the lights off, but the dark of a place that had never had light and had organized itself accordingly. She did not know the shelf. It was not on any map. It was not in the survey data from either of her previous dives or from any of the dozens of dives that had preceded hers. It should not have been there. The floor of the Challenger Deep had been mapped with sufficient resolution to detect a feature this size, and this feature was large, and it was not on any map. It was approximately 200 meters wide and extended. She could not see the full extension of it from the submersible's lights, extended into the darkness beyond their reach. It jutted from the western wall of the trench at a slight upward angle, the way a shelf juts from a wall, and its surface was too smooth for geology. Too smooth for geology. She said this to her co-pilot, Dr. James Reeve, who was running the sonar. "I'm seeing it. I've been seeing it for about 10 minutes. I've been trying to tell you." "What had you been trying to tell me?" she said. He turned the sonar display toward her. The feature was large. She had said 200 meters wide, but that was the visible width, the width she could see with the submersible's lights. The sonar was showing her the full width. The full width was significantly larger than 200 meters. "That's not a shelf," she said. "No," he said. "That's a—" "Yes," he said. She looked at the sonar display. She looked at the shape of it. She had a doctorate in marine biology and a secondary qualification in deep-sea geology, and she had been studying the Mariana Trench for 11 years, and she understood what she was looking at. She understood what shape that was. "It moved," Reeves said. She looked at him. "While you were looking at the display," he said, "it moved. I'm watching it on sonar. It's—" He paused. "It's very slow, but it's moving." She looked out the viewport. The thing below them, the thing that was not a shelf, was still there in the range of their lights. She looked at it.
She looked at the surface of it, the surface that was too smooth for geology. She looked at it for a long time before she saw the texture of it, before the scale of what she was looking at resolved into something her brain could interpret, before she understood that what she had taken for the surface of a geological feature was not a surface at all, but the outer. "Get us up," she said. Reeve was already on it. The submersible began its ascent. She kept her eyes on the viewport. The thing below them was also moving upward. Not fast, not with the speed of something attacking, with the slow, patient movement of something that had all the time that existed in the deepest place on Earth and was accustomed to things taking as long as they took. It was following them up. "How fast?" she said. "Slower than us," Reeve said. "We're pulling away." She looked at the sonar. She looked at the shape on the sonar. She had been thinking about the scale wrong. The submersible was a reference point, and she had been using it as a reference point, and the scale she had been operating with had been wrong. She recalculated. She recalculated twice. "James," she said. "I know," he said. "The size. I know." "How long has it been down there?" she said. He did not answer. She watched the sonar. The shape below them was still moving upward, still slower than them, still pulling. At the current rate, they would reach the surface 11 hours after it did. 11 hours. She looked at the sonar. She thought about the survey data, about every dive to the Challenger Deep, about why nothing this size had ever been detected. She thought about the smoothness of its surface, about what she had seen when the scale had resolved. She thought about the fact that it had not been moving when they arrived, that it had only started moving after they arrived. That something at the bottom of the deepest place on Earth that had not moved in, she could not calculate how long, she could not calculate how long, she did not want to calculate how long, had felt the submersible's presence and decided to follow it up. She thought about what it had been doing down there, what something that size did at the bottom of the deepest place in the world, what it had been waiting for. She looked at the sonar for the rest of the ascent. The shape below them continued upward, slower than them, patient. 11 hours after they surfaced, the research vessel's depth sensors recorded an anomaly at approximately 2,000 meters, something very large moving through the water column. Then it stopped. It did not surface. It turned. It went back down. She watched the sensor readings from the deck of the research vessel, and she watched the thing go back down, and she thought about why it had stopped at 2,000 meters. She thought about the light. At 2,000 meters, the last traces of sunlight were gone. Below 2,000 meters was the midnight zone. It had followed them up to the edge of its world, and then it had turned back. It had gone to the edge of the dark and looked up at where the light was. She stood on the deck and looked down at the water. She thought about what it had seen when it looked up. She thought about the fact that it had gone back down. She thought about the fact that it had now known they were up here. She thought about the fact that it had been down there in the dark for long enough that she could not calculate it. She thought about patience. She looked at the water. The water looked back.
Next time on Dark Matter. She mentioned this to David. They probably leave while you're not watching. People go to work, go to the shops. You can't watch the street all day. "I'm near the window all day," she said. "You're working. You're not watching." This was reasonable. She accepted it. She started watching. She felt guilty about this. She felt the specific guilt of someone who was being paranoid about their wonderful neighbors who had brought them wine and honey and remembered everything they said.
She felt the guilt and she watched anyway, because something was pulling at her that she could not name. She watched for 3 days. Nobody left. Not for work, not for shopping, not for any of the ordinary reasons people left their homes during the day. She saw them in their gardens, and she saw them walking between houses, and she saw them at their windows, sometimes at their windows looking out at the close, at the quiet cul-de-sac with its 7 houses and its central garden and its new arrivals at number 14.
Please like and subscribe.